Okay, we are on. Welcome to Kashmir Kitab. It is 27th June 2025. You can hear me, right? All of you?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm not able to hear anybody for some reason. But anyway, so okay, I can hear everybody now. Jeji, namaskar. Bubitas library manzipat. Bubitas library mas konas man. Well, you.
Jay, you're on mute.
Yeah, he's walking towards me. Anyway, so let's get started.
Yeah,
Very
I'm walking.
interesting chapter. Very interesting chapter, and I wish that Subhashji was here. But what did you guys? We can document our questions and thoughts in this session, I guess. And then maybe when he joins next weekend, we can ask like summary of it. So if anyone wants to go around and share their thoughts on this chapter, we are discussing Yoga Vashishtha.
Well, let me start. Yoga Vashishtha is actually a fascinating scripture. We have, as a group, a while back, we have gone through the whole Yoga Vashishtha, and it's a fascinating stories and interwoven stories, and somehow, somewhere, Maharishi Vashishtha manages to crop in everyone here and there and everywhere. It's like as if he's present everywhere. And it's just as amazing what what the Hindu thought and how it looks at the life and how it looks at this world and what really constitutes. I think there's a story that Manojji had mentioned a while back on WhatsApp group, on a Kashmir Kitab group. There were three people, and two of them were not born, and one was non-existent, and they were crossing three rivers, and two of them two of the rivers did not exist, and one did not have any water. So there's a kind of these very intricate kind of what looks very intricate stories, and then at the end of it's amazing how you can come to the conclusion of how the consciousness and the mind, how the mind works in the consciousness, and how it actually creates its own world. Every one of us, our mind creates our own world, and then weaves into it and gets eventually caught into it. In fact, if we are not careful with it, and that's something fascinating. And there's a whole bunch of stories. There's the story about these three people, and there's actually a story, Divaj and Chudala, a story where they are king and queen, and then the Chudala becomes very conscious, reaches the ever heights, and the king doesn't realize it, and then he goes on a whole set of things he does. He follows austerities, and he follows all kinds of this thing that people do who are on the spiritual path, and eventually his wife actually helps him trudge along and get into the groove where he becomes a realized being. So there's a whole lot of stories in there. I don't quite understand a lot of them actually, but one thing is for sure, that it's very abstract actually. In fact, it challenges the very concept of Shankar, Vishnu, and Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. It says, there's no such existence. It's just a figment of imagination. It's just something created by the mind itself, and that there is no real existence of it. And one of the things it actually brings out to me, which has been learning this thing, that those people who depend on fate, who think that the fate is they are destined to do this or that, or this is how they are destined to be. And it turns out that the fate is actually, you have that degree of freedom that we are told all the time. And that if you don't exercise that freedom, then you are caught in the fate, whatever is the fate. But if you make efforts, you can actually change your fate, and you can also change the outcome of your life. So it's a very that's very instructive to me. It has always been very instructive, and I kept in my mind that we don't resign ourselves to the fate, and we always have this degree of freedom where we can actually, you know, manifest and create things and do things which we think we should do, and if we're on the right path, then we can actually reach somewhere, you know, in terms of the realization. And I had one question about Subhashji. Subhashji, namaskar. You, I think you're on mute.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. I see I'm not the only one who's victim of this mute thing. You know, I had only one question about it. I think what is the proof or what is the evidence that in fact Yoga Vashishtha was written in Kashmir? You know, that Maharishi Valmiki or whoever you are saying actually it was written in Kashmir. Is there a proof or is just a legend? People think it was written in Kashmir.
Well,
Anywhere in the
most
verses, when we read the scripture, I never read anywhere that actually it was written in Kashmir or has any link.
most scholars believe it was written in Kashmir, and of course, the Laghu Yoga Vasishtha, as I mentioned on page 100, was put together by Abhinanda Pandit, a Kashmiri scholar, into 6,000
That is
couplets.
very true.
I don't
That
think
I have
there's any specific proof, but most scholars, for a variety of reasons, and I can think of, there's a very famous Maharashtrian scholar who's also written on Patanjali, and I'm sure I quote him in this book. Very, very famous. He was a professor at University of British Columbia of Sanskrit. So he and many Ashok Akludkar.
Yeah, I know him.
Yes. So they believe, for a variety of reasons and based on the contents of Yoga Vasishtha, that it's really a Kashmiri text. So I've accepted that. I'm not a scholar of texts, but everybody, I don't know of anybody who doesn't say that it's a Kashmiri text.
Yeah, to add to what Subhaji has just said, if you look at the Yoga Vashishtha by Swami Venkateswaran, I have the book here with me.
Right.
In the forward by Swami Muktananda, where he gives his blessing to this whole book, to the writing of this book, he mentions most of the scriptures were narrated to God by his devotees, but the Yoga Vashishtha was narrated to God himself. It's the teaching of sage Vashishtha imparted to Lord Rama. It contains true understanding of the creation of the world. The philosophy of Yoga Vashishtha is very similar to that of Kashmiri Shaivism. Its main teaching, so then he goes on into that, but kind of ties it again to Kashmiri Shaivism. And then I think he has mentioned in somewhere else, I remember reading, where he also mentions the fact that this text is supposed to have come from Kashmir. So I've heard, just like Subhaji had said, I'd heard from 2 or 3 different sources that it arose from Kashmir.
Actually, Lagu, I mean, the small version was made in
The
Kashmir.
small
Yeah,
version.
that was definitely, yes.
That is true. But the long one is also by scholars acknowledged to be from Kashmir. You know, it's like the debates also on Kalidas. Of course, some people say Kalidas was from Kashmir, but I didn't go there. But the thing was that in the first few centuries of the first millennium, there was so much of stuff happening in Kashmir. There's also the Vishnu Dharmotar Puran, you know, many of these Purans, so many other texts, philosophical texts. And the idea in Yoga Vasishtha, of course, is that how do you know the real from its mirror? You know, there's something happening, and it's not necessarily a physical mirror of one's imagination also. You know, what is real? It's all some kind of a recursion. And that's why that story of Leela, which I described, there are all kinds of things happen to the real and to the analogs of it.
It was like watching Inception again.
Yes.
Right, 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 right.
Actually,
With re-
it's like virtual reality, right?
Yes, and that's true. Let's forget about abstract philosophy in our own lives. What is it that one is? Who is the real I? Is the real I the stories that tell you, or what people expect you to be? In which case, you act that part, right? Because you're also acting that part. Or is there something else? So we are bouncing ourselves off different possibilities. So where is the real I? And what is time itself? In fact, I should tell you, just yesterday, I heard from the leading journal what I had in the field. I had argued that, or I've argued, and I'll share the paper with you in the next 4 or 5 days as soon as I get the proofs. I've argued that it is possible to lengthen one's lifespan. And I'll tell you why I'm even telling this story. Uh, you must have heard of the popular phrase that a watched pot of milk does not boil over. अगर आप पानी दूध दूध को रखोगे pot में and you watch it, stove पे लगा हुआ है, because you don't want to want it to boil over. The longer you watch, it won't. The moment you turn your eyes away from it, it boils over.
It spills, yes.
Now, this is, of course, just a story. Now, this idea is fundamental to deepest physics, and it's called quantum Zeno effect. And what quantum Zeno effect says is, if there is a natural physical process, and it will evolve, all nature has to evolve at its own rate. But if you observe it, its evolution stops. So observation is very powerful, and that's the idea. That idea is also in chapter 7. This is called, in Vedanta, it's called Drishti Srishtivad, which means through Drishti you create Srishti. You just have to observe. And so in this article, in this paper, which I sent to this journal, I had no idea that they would publish it, and both the anonymous reviewers loved it. I said, if one were to learn how to watch oneself, observe oneself, you can slow down aging. You see that? Now, of course, there are physiological processes also in the body. And that's what yoga is ultimately, chitta vritti nirodha. That is watching oneself, watching the surface of one's mind, because information is at the very top. And I think all of those things are somehow connected to contents
somewhat
of
related.
Yoga Vasishta.
So I can't be too loud here. I'm in the library. But um, do you think
You
this
are
is
audible.
related to what the story of relativity, not the story, the theory of relativity is of the two twins? That if the one
Okay, twins, the two twins, the one twin who goes away at a very high speed, and when he returns, he finds that the other twin is young. No, he's young. The other twin has aged, and he's still young because he's been in motion. No, that is a different concept, but maybe at a deep philosophical level, there could be some connections. But that uses a different kind of mathematics.
then do you think another way of thinking this is when we say, okay, we didn't know time kahan chala gaya?
Ah,
कि मतलब we were so involved in certain things. So that is also a different
right.
concept. Is that the same concept or
Some,
related?
some, some. In some sense, that's very beautiful, because when you let the physiological processes control yourself, which is our normal life, right? Time goes away without you being aware. But when you reflect on it, just as a yogi does, then in some metaphorical way, you're stopping time. Now, you don't have to run away from the world to be a yogi. At least in the Kashmiri tradition, you can be a householder and be a yogi. But if you learn, and maybe that's what Bhairav is, Bhairav Upasana is to look at the manifestation of Shiva in all its movement and watch that movement. And when you watch that movement, time, so to speak, stops. and that is anugraha of Shiva. I mean, you can put it that way.
Another way to look at it is that you, the essential you, are timeless. You were never born. You will never die. So there is no question of time is not even existing. It's just a construct of the mind to try to explain things that you see around the world. But
Absolutely.
in the
I think
absolute
that's
sense of the,
very beautifully put. And in fact, yesterday there was a clip on Twitter of this 99-year-old German gymnast, and she still competes in competitions, and she first started in 1935 at the age of 9, and her body is totally straight. She, the way she walked up to the two parallel bars and went over it. So I think indeed, if you are calm inside, maybe time, because then you are more in touch with your own timeless self, because time is all motion. Without motion, there is no time. And emotion, of course, is a projection of motion. Emotion also, very interestingly, that English motion and emotion are related words. But so I think there could be something there, and I think it's all these questions which are tied together in different ways in Yoga Vasishtha. And now, if one may also ask, here I am, I'm a Kashmiri, maybe I was not even connected to it. And independently, maybe it's all in our genes. We do certain things because, we are sort of driven, because in some sense, all this is already within us, not just in our mind, but also in our genes. And that's why you get to do certain things, as we know about children. Children have their own innate wisdom. In the same family, 2 or 3 children can be doing things so much differently in their stages. So maybe that is another lesson. That's the whisper from the past. The whisper from the past across ether, across Akash.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I have more points to share, but one point I wanted to just tell you, Ki, please be ready, Ki, to switch to the phone because you have started freezing. Secondly, there are 2 people who have raised their hands, Vijayji and
Okay.
Princey. Yeah, Vijayji, go first and then Princey.
Okay, Maros, Subhashi, I read this book called Case Against Reality. In fact, I attended a workshop also for that. It was actually done by Don Hoffman, who was a cognitive scientist at University of California at Irvine.
Vijayji, you are not audible to me at
No,
least.
yeah. What was the title? I didn't get it either.
Case Against Reality.
Case against
It
reality.
says
Oh, the case
Against
against reality. Okay, got it. Okay.
Don Hoffman, yeah.
Okay, I know
He actually,
Don Hoffman. He's a friend, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, basically, he argued the same thing, and he's the one who basically talks about this in the context of augmented reality and virtual reality, and how we consider these icons on the computer screen as real, but they are actually not real. They are just electrons and holes behind those screens. So yeah, he kind of makes a case against reality in that book, which is very interesting. Same idea that you were saying, that this reality is not the reality that we think it is.
Right. Now, of course, he doesn't approach it from the perspective of Vedanta or Kashmir
really
Shaivism.
sorry, 1 second. You're really saying reality is not real. That's exactly what you said.
That's what he said. But Don Hoffman approaches it more from a kind of a technical analogy. He's looking at the interface and the real thing. But in Vedanta, of course, we've always known that it's the mind, and as Rajendra ji also said, the mind gives it structure, because true reality is beyond the surface appearance. However, where I find the Kashmiri tradition so compelling and beautiful is that It says no, ultimately both are equally important. Although one could say everything is in the mind and imagination, but in reality, it's like a dance, both this and that. And I think that is the true wisdom of Kashmir. Because if you go to South India and the tradition in classical Vedanta, Shankaracharya and others, they always say, or Kumar Gandharv, I was listening to his beautiful song, Guruji, this woman says, there's nothing. If you haven't heard it, beautiful Nirguni Bhajan. ये कुछ नहीं है, मैं कहीं नहीं जाना चाहती हूँ, मैं तीर्थ भी नहीं जाना चाहती हूँ, क्योंकि तीर्थ भी नहीं, रियल कुछ है नहीं. That is one extreme, and that's also comforting in its own paradoxical way. कि कुछ नहीं है, वो भी comfort करता है. जैसे उसके कबीर के songs या जो कुमार गंधर्व गाता है. But on the other hand, we can appreciate that also because we are also embodied, and therefore the true thing is between both these opposites. Consciousness के अंदर सब कुछ है, लेकिन जो consciousness है वो body के अंदर है, हमारी body के अंदर है. ये दोनों चीजें like two sides of a coin हैं, and दोनों को appreciate करना was Kashmir's genius. And that's the reason why Kashmir created so much of amazing stuff on the arts, and because it's much easier to just walk away and say there is nothing, right? Because then you don't have any reason to construct anything. But Kashmir said no, that is true, but this is also true. Shiv bhi sahi hai aur Bhairav bhi sahi hai, and you can't just talk of Shiv beyond time. We must talk of Shiv in time, his fearful form, the Bhairav's form. तो हम भैरव की उपासना करेंगे. See, that's the other side of it.
But Valmiki and Ram was very ancient. I mean, much older than Kashmir. The way Kashmir Shaivism and concept came up.
Yeah. But that's just a frame story. It doesn't mean that Valmiki actually wrote it. Kashmir, India में ये भी tradition थी. You would hang a story. It's like the various tantras, many of which were written in Kashmir, associated with Kashmir Shaivism. They're always a conversation between Shiv and Parvati, right? Yeah, उसमें भी
Your voice is getting cut.
There is a kind of a.
I didn't hear the last part you were talking about, Subhashi.
Subhaji, can you switch to the phone?
To the phone? Am I really bad today as well? Okay, let me try it. Okay, 1 second.
Rajendra ji, you're saying something. You're on mute.
I was just saying that you're not bad. Only your sound system is bad.
You're bad if you don't follow instructions.
I know what to do. Let's see.
Monitor Maracha or Zabardast?
Oh, Zabardast.
Meanwhile, if you are able to hear, Princey ji has a question, so she can ask a question.
Yeah, please. Why don't you go? I've never used this. Princey ji, please go ahead.
Oh, Subhaji, I'll send you the link on your WhatsApp.
Okay.
It's quite straightforward, so it should take you to the browser.
Okay, I got it.
You got it?
I got something from you. Yeah. Okay.
We'll wait.
Okay, can you? Okay, so let me close this one, right?
Yeah, you can close your laptop. I can exit you.
Oh, you're on mute, Subhaji.
Okay. All right. Is it better?
Yeah.
We'll find out. So far, it is good. Yes.
So, namaskar. So, my question is very immature for this group, but I'm still going to put it out there. So, when you said that, you had a debate that a human being can extend the life, do you think it has something to do with our breath? The slower, the longer. Can it be related? That was my one like question. Because I mean, obviously the slow we breathe, it definitely does impact the physiology of the system, so hence the aging of the organs will be delayed, and hence the life will can be longer, but again, you have to be conscious of that throughout, how to breathe extremely slow. Then the second thing, I had a question. When we talk about all the philosophy that you're talking, and for the liberation, when we say, like, you have to give up, right? um, when you want to evolve and when you want to liberate, then I always often think कि एक तरफ से we want to give up everything to achieve that mukti, then you are automatically getting too attached to the mukti. So which way is the right one, right? You give up this, but then you're getting too hooked up to the mukti, right? So in isn't that attachment itself? So those are my two kind of questions there.
Okay, the first one, I think physiologists have also said that the lifespan of different animals depends upon the number of heartbeats. And they come up with a figure of 100,000 or something. So if your heart rate is slower, but heart rate, of course, we don't have any direct control over, although we can train it to be a bit slower. Certainly, breathing, and breathing is central to yoga. So if your breathing is more measured and slow, you are slowing down physiological processes, right? But now in this paper, what I argued was that you have physiological processes, and then you also have informational processes, and they are interrelated. Modern medicine or physiology does not look at informational processes, which are related. And what's the proof? If a person were to be horribly frightened, a person can even die. The heart can stop, which means the frightening getting frightened is something to do with information, right? That can impact your physiology. So if you could go straight to informational processes, which come up when we do for a yogi in trying to calm, not physically, you can't directly control the physiological processes, but through concentration by watching yourself, which brings us back to what in quantum mechanics is the quantum zero effect. When you watch something, it slows down. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to slow down in life. What it really means is, and this comes to your second question, that ultimately you are to detach yourself from your ordinary life to be attached to it in a new way, in a much more creative way. You're not running away, and you're not running away to embrace moksha and run away from this world. So it is to, it's like Shiva's dance. So ultimately, Shiva is neither here nor there. Ultimately, it's the movement. And dance ultimately, the beauty of dance is in the flow, is in the movement. So the ultimate idea then of all this and of Kashmir Shaivism and of Vedanta is to uh, create that eye, to appreciate that movement within oneself, at that moment where one is both attached and detached. Because if you are too attached, you'll fall off. You can't go through various motions. The one dancer here that I know, um, Amrita, won't you agree with that?
There are more than one dancers here. Apparently, Aarti also knows Odissi,
Okay,
but
Aarti as well. Okay, more than
let's
one
ask
dancer.
Aarti.
But don't you
Let's
agree
ask
there is
Aarti.
something to
Yes,
to that there?
absolutely. Yes, I totally agree.
And ultimately the whole thing is about dance or about any movement, even sport. If you're a great sportsman, you make it look very effortless, right? As if, oh, this guy is playing badminton or baseball or whatever game or cricket, it seems so natural. He's not even making an effort. But behind that naturalness, behind that mastery, is a whole steps of discipline, right? You've gone through that, and you have then be able to, you have become able to cultivate a connection with natural flow. And in fact, in American folklore, it is stated that sometimes a baseball batter, when he's in the zone, he's hitting the ball, when he's in the zone, when they are, nobody can stop them, they see the ball as big as this. The
Yeah.
ball is coming very, very well. And
So,
that's what happens in yoga.
and
Everything becomes clear. Attention, dhyan, everything becomes clear, laser sharp. And that movement itself takes you to the next step. And that's really all that this tradition is about.
Sure.
mhm.
Thank you. Thank you.
So coming to that point, you obviously answered the dhyan part and the breathing part of the thing, but um, coming back to the story of Leela, which is mentioned in the chapter. So you know this, and I've mentioned this once before, that when I was a kid, not a kid, but maybe like in my primary school, I was walking with my sister, and I used to look back. Okay, does the like because I used to think that the world exists because I'm looking at it, and if I don't look at it, it doesn't exist. So I used to just say, "Ki, okay, if I look back quick enough, I will see nothing behind me or nothingness." So anyway, point was that when Leela comes and she does like she's able to transcend lifetimes, not transcend, but she's existing in parallel universes, almost like parallel lifetimes. So does that mean that we never, so these are the people who have not got moksha then, right? Because they're coming back.
What is
So
moksha? Yeah, that's a separate question, right?
so yeah. So okay, my question there are two questions. One is that my sister didn't feel the same way. So um does so if for example I would have been in a state of mind where things do not exist for me, or I should say I realize that time is a factor of or a function of my realization of time. Okay, I don't know if it makes sense, but my sister doesn't, let's say, standing next to me, she doesn't realize it. So, what is real? One, you're saying the reality is that it exists because you perceive it to exist. Otherwise, it doesn't exist, right? So, why does it matter if it exists or not? Like,
Okay.
why does reality matter?
Okay, I think what this story and many other stories in the book are trying to point to is that how we live, each one of us in our imagination, all kinds of things are thought through, in not necessarily in our dreams at night, but even during daydreams. You go on this thing and you imagine, okay, if this happened and here it is, and sometimes you get so absorbed that you don't quite know, did that really happen or not, right? So in many ways, in our current lives itself, we are living many parallel lives. And all kinds of strange things or different kinds of things have happened to each one of us in our life, right? So I think what Yoga Vasishta, what it does is it takes that as a starting point of a deeper understanding. That look, uh, of course, daydreaming or whatever, you come back, and then you are bound by the physics of this embodied world. But if you didn't come back, I mean, you could imagine things happening and living lives altogether. In fact, there are amazing stories in some of these Puranas that this person um, imagines that he's gotten married, he's got children, he's got grandchildren, so happy, and then something tragedy, famine happens, or there is a flood, and then he comes back and he realizes that all of those years of experience that he had were in just a moment when he had gone to take a dip in the water, at the shore. So basically, what this book and what Vedanta is trying to tell you is that our experience of who we are is in many ways fluid. It's fashioned by our desires, by our vasanas, by also expectations that the world has, and where we are allowed to go, because we are not totally free creatures in this world. There are obstacles and so on. And so what is real and what is the mirroring of that, as in Leela's life, right? In this story, that's the very first story, uh, and and so to a certain extent, we can create our reality. Now, of course, you might say that reality is only our subjective reality. Maybe others will not agree with that, and that will be perfectly true. But then, how do we create that reality so that that reality, in a mysterious way, informs us of something deeper, which is, let's call it Shiva's world, Shivalok. We are able to sense that infinite self. That is Shiva, because we are also Shiva, right? And that is beyond time and space. Now, you might say these are all big words, empty words. In some sense, they are empty words. But they have the promise. It's like beauty. Why does beauty become so powerful for everybody, for people in one way or the other? Because it's pointing to something great. It's something abstract. It's pointing to something bigger than just our ordinary humdrum existence, and that draws you. It's a kind of a magnet which pulls you to another sphere, to another plane of experience and consciousness.
Um, Vijayji has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Uh, what I wanted to actually say was that, in Kashmir Shaivism, this limitations, there are these 5 limitations, the Kanchukas,
Right.
one of Kala, which is like the time, or limitation of time and limited of space, Niyati. So these limitations are basically what give us this concept, or this imagination of space and time, or limited space and limited time. So when this Leela is kind of looking at simultaneity and all that, that's her natural self without limitation, right? I mean,
Right.
it's basically we are all endowed with these limitations so that we can function in this world, but we are all endowed with in different ways. All individuals are different, therefore we have this combination of conchugas or limitations which are very unique to us. So Leela has something and her sister has something else, right?
Beautiful. What you said is perfectly right. So we have these limitations, and these limitations allow us to navigate through this world. And but then through different devices, through sadhana, and through the practice, you can hope to pierce through these limitations and experience the transcendent, experience the para. And so that's all one can do, because para is not time, space, and matter. And because whatever is embodied is going to die, everything, including this earth, including the solar system, everything has a finite life. So then, shouldn't everybody be totally depressed and dejected, just as Ram is in the beginning of Yoga Vasishtha? He's depressed. He says, "What's life all about?" And so then all the instruction that's being given in Yoga Vasishtha by Vasishtha is that, look, that infinity also exists within you. You can experience it. And that infinity one may not be able to talk about, because we can only talk about things which are in time and space, which are limited by these kanchukas, right? So, and so be it. But in this movement, we can experience that infinite bliss or ananda or whatever else you might want to call it, or that flow, which uh, to the very heart of our experience convinces us that indeed this is what it is. Although you will not be able to explain it to somebody else who is bound by his or her own kanchukas. You won't be able to, because that person won't be able to understand what you have experienced. It's like the experience of death. You know, a lot of people, including Freud and Jung, when they were 38 or 39, a lot of, or Ramana Murthy, when he was a young boy, a lot of other people have had a life transforming event in an experience of death while they were alive. You know, felt experience, but maybe they were sleeping, a dream, or whatever else. Because as the Shaivite tradition says, Shiva is both, uh, transcendent bliss, uh, but also time is also Kal, Mahakal. And you approach one through the other. So you approach Shiva through Bhairava. Do you see that? And it's very subtle. And so you have to embrace death. Without embracing death, you cannot live.
Yeah, I guess we have discussed that before, but I do want to point out that your phone is better than your laptop. I have this question, um, which you have not actually expanded on in the book, in this chapter about with Rama's summary of human condition as background, summary of the book section, where
Uh-huh.
it says which consists of 6 sections, namely Vairagya, which is what you talked about. Kirama was in Vairagya, he was dispassionate. Then there is Mumukshu, Mumuksu,
This
Moksha.
so longing for liberation, and then there is
mumukshu.
creation,
Yeah,
Mumuksha.
mumukshu. Uh,
and then there is Utpatti, which is creation or origin. So this means that the person is dispassionate, then he is longing for liberation. Then there is creation, then he becomes creative or he tries to create. I don't know what.
Utpatti,
Um,
Utpatti means to the creation, right?
creation of
the
origin.
Mm.
creation means what? Like he becomes from dispassionate, he longs for liberation, and then he becomes creative. Oh, can somebody tell him the page number? Because I'm on Kindle.
107,
Oh, 107. Let's see.
second paragraph.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Six, Vairagya,
So
dispassion. We're Vairagya, Varaga, Mumukshu, longing for liberation, Utpatti, uh, and Sthiti, existence, Upashanti,
And nirvana.
dissolution, and Nirvan, or
So
liberation.
what is the meaning of, I mean, what in this context is the meaning of Utpatti and Sthiti in terms of the six?
Oh, it's like Shiva's dance also. There are three main aspects to Shiva. Creation, Srishti, Sthiti, and then Samhar or Sanghar, right? Creation, then uh, maintaining of the
Maintain.
creation, and then ending, dissolution. So this is written somewhat differently here. Vairagya, firstly, from your situation, why would you even want to change if you're happy, doing whatever you're doing every day? So you have to question. So that is Vairagya, right? And then Mumukshu, then you have to have a desire for Mukti. Mumukshu is liberation, Mukti ki Ichha. And then Utpatti, from that Ichha comes creation. Ichha
That what
Shakti is what you need.
creation of what?
Creation of the change, creation of that change within you, of that transformation within you. And then Sthiti, and Upashanti. Shanti, of course, is Upashanti is approaching Shanti, because you're also a self. You can't be totally in
Satisfied with
Shanti.
something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that is as good as being. Well, how do you discriminate between dispassion and dissolution?
Uh, this passion is vairagya. Upashanti is you're already approaching it from a very different mental situation, right? Um,
So you okay, so
Vairagya,
maybe
you
in
don't know. You're
Vairagya,
unhappy about everything completely, right? But in Upashanti, you're already approaching peace. You're next to peace. Vairagya, you don't have any peace. You're totally in a chaotic state of mind. So this is approaching it, near your objective, which is to find peace,
Transcending
find
to
total.
that, reaching to
so
that.
basically
Yeah,
dissolution means basically samhar is what you're trying to say.
right. Somehow,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And see, earlier you were talking about the dance where or any performing in front of an audience. When you are in a complete flow and you basically give up your and all that, and you are in the zone. That's also that peace. That's also that shantarasa basically. That's what
Yeah,
you are
because you,
you are
bec-
achieving that union.
These are all
yeah, because
stages
the
of
flow,
transition.
yeah, the flow has its own logic. You've thrown yourself, and then you go through those sub stages automatically. Yeah.
Okay, I think means I have kind of liked this. I enjoyed this chapter actually. Um, but if anybody else has any questions, please go ahead. Yeah. Otherwise, please turn on your cameras and I'll take pictures at least before one of you leaves. But yeah, Rajendra
What
Razanji has raised his hand.
Yeah,
Vashika
Rajendra ji,
pass? Vashika
I
Rajendra
was,
pass.
Raj, Rajendra ji,
I had a
Rajendra
question.
Razanji.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah, now we can, but we can't see you. But okay.
that's okay. You don't need to see my face.
Okay.
Hey, so there's one section which I couldn't quite understand, but yeah, the whole first of all it was a very nice summary. It was like almost like your Vashishtha for dummies. For people like us, it's great. So there was one part there was where it was written when water and fire come together, they acquire the qualities of each other.
Hmm.
Similarly, when the self and the inert body come together, the self looks like the non-self, and the non-self looks like the self. So I couldn't understand what this means or what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is actually a very subtle point, which is this: if uh, in Vedanta or in Kashmir Shaivism, the actual ground of reality is Atma, right? Or Shiva. That is the actual ground. And the physical systems are all unfolding according to natural law. Physics or biology, everything is that. Now, if you were to, now, of course, Atma operates from the top in some sense, but the actual embodied universe goes according to karma, whatever karma one has done. So, in that sense, uh, we this uh, from a subject's perspective, it might appear that, well, why do you even need the Atma? Because the whole universe is going unfolding by itself. So you don't need the self. So self and no self, they turn out to be two different ways of looking at the same reality. Or what I'm trying to say is that if you were to go to a scientist who believes in reductionism, everything comes from bottom up. A Vedantin may have no difficulty talking to them, even though a Vedantin comes from top down, because on the top is Atma. Because this Atma operates in ways that it does not influence uh, reality at the most scattered level, reality as we experiencing. So in some sense, there's a paradox, an opposition out there, that uh, and the reason is that freedom itself is paradoxical. Where does freedom come from, one might ask? everything is according to law, influences our inner state, then where does freedom come from? So freedom, that state of mind, is what is paradoxical. In fact, I did try to approach it in that interview that I had on PBS last Friday. That, and if you haven't seen it, that we are truly conscious only when we are creative. Because if we are not being creative, we are driven by outside forces. We have no freedom. We may still experience or aware of what's happening, but we truly are not free. And we are free when we are creative, because then something paradoxical happens. In true freedom, and now I'm going to say something which appears contradictory. In true freedom, you don't have freedom, and what that means is, when you are truly free, you express the freedom of the gods, of the devatas. So you're operating through them, because you truly, as a structure of physiology and biology, you cannot have any freedom.
Yeah, you are basically become the conduit. Okay. So, okay,
Right.
I'm going to,
And
But
I'm
one
but
thing
going
the
is
to,
only
this.
reason the
one
only
second,
reason we are free, the
one
only
second.
reason we are free is because we are God.
Right, because there can
Yes.
be only one free person. Otherwise we can't be free. Absolutely, Vijayji. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to request everyone to turn on their cameras, take a picture because I have to exit the library right now. Okay. And then I will join from my phone. Just a sec.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar.
No, we can stay. I want to just take a picture. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Rajendra ji was saying something.
What I'm thinking of when we talk of the layers and it's based on Atma and based on this thing, I think to me it says we miss the idea that actually it's all part of the same gimish, consciousness, for lack of better word. Consciousness is everything, whether it's the our Panchabhut, whether it's the space, whether it's the Atma, whether it's the Paramatma. It's all part of the same image, same thing. Everything stems from there. So, so,
That, yeah.
so the
That,
idea to say that when we think in terms of the layers, then it actually brings in the concept of duality, which kind of goes against the very basic tenets of Vedantic Hinduism, or even the Shaivite Hinduism, because the difference is in the Shaivism, Shaivite philosophy, everything is real in the sense. So long as it's unreal as well as real at the same time. There's nothing which is, although it's all a creation of the cosmic mind, a creation of the cosmic mind, but whatever has been created by the cosmic mind is all real. We cannot deny our existence. We cannot deny existence of other fellow beings. At the same time, we also don't have to think that this is something unique. We're all part of the same big continuum. And if we keep that in mind, a lot of the confusion will go away in that, rather than try to build layers in it. When we start building layers, then it gets lost. Somewhere duality creeps in, and the duality has a way of bringing in differences and different, all kinds of personal ego, I, and a small I-ness. And I think that creates quite a bit of confusion in there. So I think if we keep it in mind that this is all part of the same ultimate Chaitanya, then there is no difference between what we are saying or what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. I have that freedom. I have that limited freedom to basically to behave by what my conscience allows me, or if I listen to my conscience. If I'm very outrageous and if I don't listen to it, then of course my behavior will probably look bad to everyone here. But if I'm not outrageous and if I do, then actually I'm within my limits. But I'm still exercising that freedom. That's where the freedom plays its role. So that's what Vashishtha I try to say. You have that degree of freedom where you are not, you don't resign to the destiny and think that destiny is all there is. I have no free will. You have free will and you can change your destiny if you want to. But if you want to, you have to act accordingly. You mean the sense you have to realize that you are not this individual small I that will act independently. You are part of the same big consciousness, big universal Chaitanya, and that Chaitanya would basically, if you feel it and if you can realize it, then it's possible to actually exercise that freedom, without impinging on anyone else in the process.
So, Rajendraji, all that you said is beautiful. There is one, I mean, one could take this position, and in philosophical schools also, what you call idealism, there is nothing but consciousness. But then in our embodied self, there's got to be duality. There is duality. There's one I and there's you. And therefore, we have to play with both of these, as you correctly point out. We have to learn this dance to be one, just one with everything, and also to be two, because you're also apart. And that's how you can think of flow, because ultimately you could also say there is nothing excepting change, and we are a part of that flow. And in that flow, we want freedom.
So, Subhashi, I wanted to ask if that concept of non-self versus self again, just getting back to that non-self seems to be something coming straight from the ideas of Buddhism, like, and the self. So, was this a proto-Buddhist kind of test? Because even with Shankara, a lot of people say that Shankaracharya was a proto-Buddhist. He's used Buddhist thought, but instead of the non-self, he just created a term called self, which is Brahman, or anything which is infinite. It's attributeless. And as you were just now saying, like Kumar Gandharva, and even sings these songs, the bhajans of the Nirgun, Atma, right? So, but there's a beautiful song there where Nirgun, there's a Nirgun bhajan in which Kabir writes, Nirgun Guni Re Gaunga. I'll sing this.
Right.
Praise of
Very
all the.
nice.
It's a very nice song, right? But he's saying of the same Nirgun Brahma, I'm going to sing all attributes to it, out of my own love for it. So we sometimes create this duality just because we want to actually worship the thing that pure, and in doing that, it kind of gives us pleasure.
True. And I think that's what Yoga Vasishtha then is instructing us, that we are also creating all this ourselves. We know it's all one, but then through our mind, we are creating in mirror image our own universes, and we are taking a lot of delight in that. Right? We do that all the time. And that's why even if we love Nirguni songs, we give attributes to this Nirgun self. And then as in, in Krishna Bhakti, there it's the attribute, it's the love of Krishna with Radha, etc., which itself is a source of such comfort for the individual, for the person who feels lost, because then it's that love which is more than what the individual self is. So ultimately the takeaway, as far as I am concerned, is, and which is where this Kashmiri tradition is amazing, is that it's talking of this dance between all these possibilities. It's not that you've got to be frozen in one or the other, because ultimately, consciousness, which is our innermost self, is the same mystery as the mystery of time. And as we know, time also has a frightening aspect. In fact, just today on Twitter, there was a story of this famous Indian actress who died at the age of 40. She was in some show, some very popular show, some Shefali somebody, at the age of 40.
Oh, got cut. Oh, you're on mute.
Maybe his phone
He's
battery.
back. He's back.
Yeah,
You're
you have
on
to
mute,
unmute.
Suresh.
You have to unmute Sumarji.
Nice to
Subaji,
see
you'll
you,
have to
Artiji.
unmute.
Yeah, he's gently muted.
Nice to see you, Artiji, after a long time.
Subaji, you'll have to unmute yourself.
He's in a zone.
It's another realm, maybe, where he's talking to us.
You are clicking on the video. I think the button for mute is just next to it. On the phone, it's a little different. It looks like a mic.
He's in another multiverse talking to another set of people.
Different versions of ourselves.
Yes.
Today we saw two Subhashjis, like Leela 1 and
Right.
Leela 2.
Exactly.
One Arundhati and one Leela.
Oh, I don't know.
But it was so funny that at the end of it, while Subhashji figures out to unmute, uh, it was so funny to just see that, oh, then the husband Leela 1 and Leela 2 like lived happily ever after. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
अच्छा
Someone's
Subhaji
happy.
And both
Like,
married.
Subhaji ऐसा पूछता हूँ. Yeah, I
हाँ,
think I
Subhashji
got
have
it.
unmuted. Yes,
I
yes.
got it. I
Yeah,
got
we're
it.
back.
Yeah, yeah. So seriously, you know what is interesting, and especially the current time that we are living in with AI making us to ask the question: in what sense are we different from AI? Right? What do most people do? We go to our phones or go to our laptops or go to our novels and go from one story to another, go from one picture to another, go from one clip to another on a social media. And we probably do the same thing in our mind's eye before these computers existed, AI machines existed. What did we do? We would go in from one chain of thought, chain of images to another, to imagine some future, and one could get absorbed in that for any length of time. And that happens even now because that's human nature. That is what the mind is constructed of the Mahabhutas and Ahankar and Chitta. Chitta is memory. So we are doing that. All of this is happening in our memory space. So the whole raises all these questions. How do we, in this situation, now that we are confronted with this fact, how do we find our true self and find our true self without running away from this world? Because that is one easy way to say, okay, all this doesn't really matter. Let's go to a mountain cave. But okay, but then you can even ask the question, what will you find in the mountain cave? You have still the
Probably
same
life.
problem, right? So you still won't find anything at all. And therefore, being a part of this world, how do we find that firstly that chamatkar? How do we find confirmation in our mind that indeed there is something? Because it's one thing to say, there is something because my Guruji has said this, or because my tradition says this. But the second thing is to truly experience it in your being. And when you truly experience it in your being, that is life transforming. Then you're not the same person anymore. And
I have
that's
I
what,
have this last
yeah.
question. Sorry. Finish your thought. Sorry. And that's what.
Yeah, so I think that's what all these books or texts or Yoga Vasishta was meant to provide that capacity for self-transformation. Vasishta, through his instruction of Rama, that you are depressed, life is miserable, as the great European novelists, in the 19th century, 20th century, read all their books. Ultimately, okay, it's misery, life has no meaning, right? This or that. But no, there is chamatkar. There is something self-transforming that can happen. And we should have faith. So you have to have faith. There is a special reason for each one of us. I think that is the takeaway. Each one of us is here for a special reason, and that's not to run away from this world, to be a part of it, to transform ourselves, and to transform everybody around us.
I had a question about, again, I really like the story of Leela. It brought back some of the movies that, talk about past life and future life, and then the person remembers, oh yeah, I remember you from my past life, etc. And also it brings back the book that I read about many lives, many masters, which we've discussed in the past as well. Um, my question is that there was recall, right? There's a memory recall. So, but memory is part of the body. So the body had finished, but then they could still recall their previous janam, which I don't think. Then memory is not part of just body. Then memory is really part of your consciousness or your soul. But is that what we had not, we had kind of disassociated them, right? We thought that, okay, fine, memory is something that is not associated, or consciousness is, in spite of not having any memory, right? So I kind of got confused, like how was the recall, like how would she have had recalled, or he would have recalled that, oh, he was from the, yeah, he also had her in her previous janam, in his previous janam.
People speak about regression therapy, that in a certain state, then you can go back to your previous lives. Now, I'm not even saying that one should believe in that, that indeed it happens, because one can also project all those regression states on oneself. How do you separate what's real from imagination? But it's also
Yeah, and that's
true.
what Brian Weiss does, right?
Right. But it's also true that there are two aspects to our memory, to our chitta. One, of course, is the daily images that we take in. But there is something more which we experience sometimes in dreams. And that's why dreams are also a doorway, as the Upanishads say, Hiranyagarbha. They are the womb, the golden womb, where all the gifts are given to you, because during the day you're only watching. You are in this four-walled room, then you're gone to your office, you're in your car, so you're in spaces which are structured, right? But in your dream state, that's when the devatas, and devatas are the centers, the cognitive centers within you, the devatas connect up the atma, the chidakash, the Akash of the whole cosmos, to you through the Akash. And so now, of course, how to interpret is important, because, and you got to be receptive. If you're receptive, then you are, each one of us, and this is indeed true. Each one of us is always looking for some hints from the beyond as to what मैंने क्या करना है. अब मैं यहाँ तक पहुंचा हूँ, पहुंची हूँ, आगे मैंने क्या करना है. ठीक है. Do I have to write
I do
another
this a
book?
lot of time. I was like Pushra Bhagwanas.
नहीं, do I write another
Easiest
book?
way.
Do I write another book, and what does it even mean? और मैंने कुछ और करना है. What do I have to do?
But it
And
comes
I
to
think,
you. But it eventually comes to you. And then you know that it's to be done, right?
right, then you have to do it, and then you are an instrument. Ultimately, you can only be an instrument. And then you have to do it, and then it's that in that process, that unfoldment, other things happen to you, and that's when the Devi instructs you. See, Devi as the teacher, Saraswati or Durga, whatever else. Durga, of course, is Kari Shakti, right? So then or Gyan Shakti, Lakshmi. So then you know you're uncovering other layers of your own self. जो अंदर बिल्कुल भीतर self है ना. And I always say that you are not going to run away. I am totally attached to this idea that while being a part of this, being in a constructive, in a compassionate way to relate to everybody through the path of love. Why? Because we are all connected, because it's the same Atma within each one of us. That's why we can empathize with each one of us. And if any of us was in the situation of any of the others, we would have probably lived the same way. So really, what's the difference between one and the other, right? So if really that is the case, then what else is the goddess saying to us? I think that's partly what Yoga Vasishtha is about.
Okay. So
I
any
thought
more
Tashona
questions?
Sudashi idea ke I heard in one of the lectures 5 years ago that this Yoga Vashishtha, Laghu Yoga Vashishtha was written on Hari Prabhat, Pradhiman Hill. Do you know anything about it?
I may have mentioned it. I don't know the Laghu Yoga Vasishtha, right? And it's all available on the internet. If you just Google it, you'll get the whole text. And um, and so I don't know any further. I've read both the translations. I've got both the Venkateshananda's, the smaller one and the larger one, and I read through it. Absolutely impressed. I think this is the greatest storybook. Now, of course, some people look at it as scripture, but even as a novel, as a storybook, this is one of the most amazing books that's ever been written. It's not been equaled in any other book. So
Which one? The Laghu Vashishtha or Yoga Vashishtha?
no, the whole Yoga Vasishtha,
Okay, okay.
the 26,000 shlokas of it, which is the third largest.
Have you read it fully?
Yeah, I've read it. I've read it also in both the translations, both Venkateshananda's translations. There's
In
another
which lifetime? In which lifetime?
Well, it's not that much. 26,000 shlokas is not that much because
Because
once
now I see you can recall from the previous life, so I don't know.
He has no kanchikas. He has no kanchikas.
No, but really,
Yeah.
but shall I tell you something? Okay, to be very honest, ultimately, the true message behind all of these books and all this story is very simple. And what is the true message? The true message is कि एक para है और एक embodied hai. There is our body and then there is para. Para is Atma. And the whole thing is said then in complicated ways. Even if you read the Bhagavad Gita, then you have these gunas, and there is a mixture and this and that. But really, if you can feel in your bones this fact that there is a transcendent reality of which we are a part, but of which we are also, from which we are also separated. Because in our autobiographical self, we are separated from it. We are governed by the forces of Prakriti. We can't go beyond it. We can't physically fly, or only even the thoughts that come to us will be seeded by the previous chain of thoughts, right? Or by our udyam, the effort. Okay, you or something spontaneously. You are somewhere and then suddenly an idea comes. And normally, where it happens is in satsang, like this. This is a kind of a satsang. You are in a group and then suddenly the idea comes from somewhere. But in reality, you don't even have to read all the texts. You look at somebody like Raman Maharshi. He probably didn't read any text at all. But he had that sense because once you sense it to your inner being that this is what you are, the rest is all exposition, uh, adding structure to it, which you can do it, which is the reason why people have written more and more tantras, more and more storybooks, or you have all these stories in Yoga Vasishtha, and you could also come up with your own stories, and they'll be as powerful as the ones that you read. And I truly mean it. Truly mean it.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody else has more thoughts? I know Subhasji has already asked us to write a book in this session as well. he tries his best.
अच्छा कतिमस कातनेरा
Absolutely, absolutely. That is what it is, and then there are जो secret होता है, it's revealed in different layers. कथा से कथा निकलती है तो सीक्रेट लेयर से निकलता है, और लेयर से निकलना इसलिए जरूरी है क्योंकि श्रोता जो है वो डिफरेंट स्टेट में है. तो हर एक श्रोता के लिए appropriate layer होनी चाहिए. You can't if you talk of the greatest abstraction and then it'll fall flat. वो कहेगा ये क्या बोल रहा है, आदमी क्या बोल रहा है. फतेर इंसान छू, right? Then that can also happen.
Very much.
Mucho.
Khachki.
All right. So then with that, I think we should conclude the session. Next week is July 4th weekend. So we will not have a session. But if you are at the KOA camp in Chicago, please come meet. But otherwise, have a nice long weekend following this Friday. And see you in July.
Namaskar.
Bye.
Namaskar.
Namaskar to everybody,
Namaskar.
and the very best for the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
All right.
Namaskar.
Bye. Namaskar.
Everybody has to leave to end the streaming. Namaskar, Subhash.
Acha, namaskar.